I'm here at the studios of KALW in San Francisco, speaking with Joan Williams, professor of law and founder and director of the Center for WorkLife Law at the University of California, Hastings College of the Law. And Joan is out with a new book called Reshaping the Work-Family Debate, Why Men and Class Matter. And she argues that in order to improve family public policies, we need to reframe the debate and talk about gender and class. And Joan, I understand that even though the word class is on the cover of your book, in most of all the interviews you've done, class hasn't even been brought up. Why?
I think progressives have a hard time talking about class. And I think at a very basic level, many progressives like to think of themselves as upper middle class. If you look at it objectively, upper middle class people are really in the top 13% of American families. They're an elite. And they think of people, the people in the middle 53% of Americans, median income $64,000, those are the real middle class. They think of progressive professional and managerial people as rich. They don't think of themselves as middle class. So I think that we're already in a place that's uncomfortable for many progressives.
And you've argued that progressives have completely failed when it comes to reaching out to the white working class.
It's actually even more concerning than that. Often these progressives, they're actually quite disrespectful of people in this middle 53%. I think of Homer Simpson, for example. What is Homer Simpson but a stereotype of a blue-collar guy who is overweight, dumb, borderline alcoholic? We would not tolerate, as progressives, that kind of stereotype of a person of color, nor should we. But we shouldn't tolerate that kind of stereotype of white working class people either. It's simply disrespectful. Now, it's inconsistent with our values as progressives. It's also politically suicide. If you look at what happened to destroy the New Deal coalition, the white working class left. The number of white working class folks who voted Democratic fell from 60% to 40%, and that is why we cannot win an election. And so we need to begin to talk less disrespectfully of working class people, and we also need to think at a very concrete level about why the progressive agenda does not appeal to these folks. It's complicated, but one important element is that when we had the New Deal coalition, the focus of the Democratic Party was on universal programs. So Social Security, unemployment, FHA, VA mortgages, things that benefited a very broad range of Americans. In 1960, we focused to a very tight focus on the poor and to means-tested programs. Seemed logical at the time. On the other hand, those kinds of means-tested programs have really fueled class conflict in the United States as people who think of themselves as hardworking Americans struggling against disadvantage, which by the way they are, class disadvantage, look and say, the government doesn't care about me, it only cares about the poor. And I think it's very important to recognize that these means-tested programs also, because they didn't have a viable political coalition behind them, turned out to be very embattled and to have offer very paltry benefits. And so even to help the poor, I think the important thing to do is to shift to more universal programs. And I think if the Democrats just did those two things, number one, stopped the class affronts, and stopped calling people trailer trash, stopped making fun of flamencos on the lawns. That kind of thing is what I call a class act. It enacts your higher class status, and it frankly poisons American politics. So that's the first very, very easy thing I think that progressives could do, and then to focus not on tightly bound means-tested programs, but on universal programs. I think that we could begin to open up some space in this country for a progressive politics that actually was sustainable.
You've done a number of interviews about your book. Why do you think it's so rare for journalists to ask you about class?
Goodness, I haven't a clue. It's astonishing. I have to say, Rose, you are the first, absolutely the first journalist who has been willing to talk about class. Except I had a piece, I have to say, a shout out for the Washington Post, published an Outlook piece about class, stemming from my book. I got emails from throughout the country, like 40 emails. Finally, somebody is talking about this. But other than that, Rose, you are the only one who's been willing to talk about class. I think this is kind of a painful topic because the first step for many progressive professional managerial people, and you see how I am dressed, I'm one of them, is to recognize that we are an elite. We are the top 13% of Americans. And ordinary working class folks, middle class people, look at us and they say those people are rich. And my reaction is, you know what? We are rich. We got to get over that. But the other thing I think we have to realize is that in talking about class, we have social privilege and we shouldn't be exploiting that. That's simply not consistent with our ideals as progressives. The other thing, the reason I think this is a hard place for us to go, is that white working class people, and this is true actually of Latinas and many African Americans as well, they really value traditional morality, they value religion, they value the military, and why do they? Because these families feel they're one step away from poverty. And so the disciplined life is very important to them. They forgot to take Nietzsche in college. Whoops, they didn't go to college. And so they turn for that discipline to the traditional tools that our culture offers them. Now, unfortunately, that fuels things like opposition to gay marriage, opposition to abortion, and I, as a progressive, you know what? I'm not willing to give up those things. On the other hand, why am I in favor of gay marriage? It's because I think families are very important. I think family stability is very important. I think it's important for children. I think it's tough to make a relationship work. I want to help people live that disciplined, ordered life. That is a way to talk about gay marriage that is not so alienating for middle-class people. The language of human rights, that sends lots of class signals of this is my language. This is all about it's very alienating. And I have to say, as a progressive, do I think everybody should get married? No, of course not. If you don't want to live this stable middle-class life, go for it. The sky's the limit. But the fact is, most people do. What we're seeing now is many gay people do. And so if we learned more about working class culture and could bridge this, what I call the class culture gap, we could begin to talk in ways that connect with the middle 53% of Americans. And you know what? Republicans are already doing it, folks. That's the only alternative.